Story 1. What kind of devilry is this? I mentally asked myself. While working at my desk, I absent-mindedly scratched a spot on my arm. Looking at it, I noticed that the area I had been scratching was inflamed with a red rash about an inch in diameter. I'll have to check tonight when I get home if there are any spiders nearby. Most likely, I was bitten while I was asleep last night, so I'll start with the bedroom. By the time I got home, most of the redness had disappeared and much of the itching had stopped. It didn't worry me too much, but I decided to search our bedroom that evening to try and find the culprit behind the bite. My wife Jill was waiting for me. She works in the city but usually comes home and has dinner earlier than I do. As I entered the kitchen, I smelled the aroma of roast beef coming from the pot. When I walked in, she turned away from the stove and smiled slightly. "Dinner will be ready in half an hour," she said as I leaned in to kiss her. She wrinkled her nose and gave me a light kiss before turning back to the stove. "Is that all I get?" I asked, feeling a little disappointed. Lately, she seemed very reserved in our relationship, showing coldness, even disrespect toward me. "I'm tired, and you're lucky I have the energy to kiss you and make dinner. By the way, you didn't take out the trash before leaving for work, and now there's a full bag under the sink." "I'll take out the trash later," I replied, hoping to calm her down. I saw her face turn red and knew what was coming. "Why the hell not now? You always try to put everything off." This had become typical of our relationship recently, and I was getting a little tired of it. It seemed like she was ready to argue and complain about me at any moment. She didn't ask how my day went, so I simply kept quiet about the bite on my arm. I wondered if her behavior might be related to depression. I had read somewhere that when a wife starts nitpicking her husband and getting upset easily, it could be a symptom of depression. It was better to be cautious, as it was obvious she was in a bad mood. I quietly pulled the trash bag from under the sink while she glared at me and took it out to the bin in the garage. Then, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and went to the living room to wait for dinner to be ready. I just wanted to keep my distance from her. If depression was the issue, she needed to see a psychiatrist and get treatment, but I hesitated to bring it up. I could imagine her reaction if I mentioned it, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to deal with that. Jill and I have been married for about 10 years, and we don't have children because she decided that her career was more important. She is 35 years old, quite attractive, while I am 36, with an average appearance. In other words, I don't stand out in a crowd. She heads the underwriting department at a regional insurance company, and I am an engineer at a local consulting firm. We both earn good money and don't struggle financially. When we first got married, there was a lot of love and passion, but over the years, that feeling has faded. After dinner, I took care of the cleaning while she went into the living room. As I worked, she announced that she was going to chat with our neighbor. They spent a lot of time together. The neighbor's name was Fran, and she was divorced. Her husband had caught her cheating, and after filing for divorce, he simply packed up his things and moved to California. I didn't really like how much time Jill spent with her, but I didn't interfere too much. I decided that while she was out, I would check our bedroom for spiders after I finished cleaning up after dinner. Later in the bedroom, I used a flashlight to inspect the room and the furniture, but I didn't see any spiders. I did find a small brown bug on the headboard, which I caught and put in an empty pill bottle. Then I found another one under the pillow, which I killed. I was curious about what these creatures were, where they came from, and whether they might have bitten me. My friend Jake knew a lot about different insects, and I thought he might have the answer. I gave him a call. "What's up, Jim?" he asked. "Jake, I need your help. I found this bug in our bedroom, and I'd never seen anything like it before. Can you take a look? I'll take a close-up photo and email it to you." "Sure," he replied. A few minutes later, I sent the email with the photo. Then, I leaned back in my chair and waited. About 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "Hey Jim, you should get an exterminator. You've got bed bugs, and they're very difficult to get rid of. That's why I recommend finding an exterminator as soon as possible. Have you or Jill traveled recently? They're usually brought back from cheap hotels. That's one way they can end up at home or even at work. No, we haven't left the house in the past couple of months, and we haven't been near a hotel room. I haven't heard of any at work either. At least, Jill hasn't mentioned anything about her workplace. Well, you've brought them in from somewhere. Like I said, get in touch with an exterminator, and they might have some ideas for you. If they're only in the bedroom and it's recent, the rest of the apartment might still be clean. All right, thanks, Jake. Bedbugs. Dan. I thought I'd better head upstairs, search the bedroom, and see if I can find the source. It's already too late to call an exterminator, so I'll have to wait until morning. Before going to the bedroom, I turned on my old computer and opened Wikipedia to read about bedbugs. There was a lot of unpleasant information about these tiny creatures. The only saving grace, I thought, was that Jill hadn't complained about any bites yet. So maybe we hadn't reached the infestation stage, but it would happen soon enough if they started laying eggs. I began my search with our bed. After checking the seams and crevices of the mattress, I didn't find any new bed bugs or signs of their presence. Looking under the bed, I noticed a small fabric bag among the dust and rolls of gift wrapping paper that Jill kept there. Jill used to take the bag with her to work when she planned to stop by her wellness club afterward. I pulled it out and carefully examined it. It was empty, and I didn't find any bed bugs, but it seemed I had found some evidence. I also noticed a hardened residue at the bottom of the bag that looked like dried male secretions. When I brought it to my nose, I smelled what was unmistakably the scent of those secretions mixed with the smell of female fluids. What the hell? I thought. What's going on? These aren't my secretions. Is she cheating on me? Maybe there was some other explanation, but I couldn't think of anything right away. Could she have lent the bag to a friend? Unlikely. If she's fooling around with someone, I need to find out quickly and then decide what I'm going to do. Forgetting about the search for bedbugs, I put the bag back in its place, went to my den, and poured myself a large scotch on the rocks. Should I confront her? Before I do that, I need to be sure she's having an affair and find out with whom and for how long. That will determine my next steps. A confrontation would just lead to denial and leave me with no clarity and no trust. That's not the best way to continue our marriage. But how do I find out? I could hire a private investigator, but that would likely be too expensive, so I'd have to handle it myself. Electronic gadgets were all the rage, so I went back to my computer to search for them. There seemed to be a ton of websites selling devices designed to catch cheating spouses. I reviewed the different surveillance items to see what would fit my situation without costing too much. Judging by the look and smell of the bag, Jill hadn't been going to the spa after work. She was using that time to meet with her lover, carrying her lingerie for their rendezvous in the bag, and then back home. It was obvious that she was going to a motel or private house, not having sex in the backseat of a car. I used this information to decide on my purchases. Eventually, I chose a small recording device that could be hidden in her bag and a GPS tracker that could be attached to her car. I didn't think tapping her phone would work since she mainly used her mobile phone for personal calls. The GPS tracker would help me monitor her location when she was away from home. I pulled out my credit card and was just finishing placing the orders with express shipping when I heard Jill come home. I heard her go into our bedroom. Her impatience and disregard toward me had become common lately, and now I knew the reason. She was cheating on me, and we might very well end up separating. So I needed to start thinking about protecting myself financially. I made some bank and investment transfers on my old computer. Once I finished, I felt a bit better. If, for some reason, I was wrong, I could undo things later. However, it was unlikely that I was mistaken. I would make changes to my insurance later, after I had solid proof of her infidelity. 2 days later, I received the surveillance devices I had ordered. It didn't take me long to read the instructions for the GPS tracker and set up my laptop to monitor it. Then I quickly slipped into the garage and attached the tracker to the underside of her car. I did the same with the mini voice recorder when she went to visit her friend Fran that evening. The recorder's transmitter went into the trunk of her car. Once everything was set up, I leaned back in my chair and waited. I wouldn't have to wait long because tomorrow was Thursday, and she usually stopped by the spa after work on that day. She typically left for work earlier than I did, and the next morning I watched on my laptop via the GPS tracker as her car headed toward her workplace. She took her small gym bag with her, so I knew she was likely going to meet her lover. While she was driving, I could hear the radio playing, and then I heard her voice when she spoke on her mobile phone. "Hi, are you ready for tonight?" "Good, same time and place as usual." "All right. See you there. I love you." My suspicions were confirmed. Her declaration of love to him likely meant that they had been doing this for a while, and she might be planning to leave me. Now, I just had to figure out who he was. I would follow her tonight after work and see who she meets. It seemed like they used different cars, which would help me stay unnoticed while observing. That day, I left work early and parked outside her workplace about half an hour before she was due to leave. Her car was still in the parking lot while I waited, but soon after the workday ended, her car started moving. I tracked her on my laptop. Then I started my car and followed her to the Red Roof Motel by the highway. I pulled into the motel parking lot a few minutes after she arrived, hanging back to observe from a distance. She was still sitting in her car, but soon another car pulled up and parked next to her. A man got out, waved at her, and walked into the motel. He came out a few minutes later, got into his car, and drove toward an apartment complex. She followed him in her car. They both entered room 142. As she entered, she was carrying her small gym bag. Her lover looked familiar to me, and I tried to remember where I had seen him before. He was short, slim, but fairly handsome. Then it hit me. I had seen him at several office parties at Jill's workplace that we had attended. He was married to a red-headed woman, much larger than him, and she definitely had a fiery temper and was very possessive of her husband. I wondered what she would do if she found out about this little rendezvous. I even remembered their names, Joe and Melinda Bateman. We had sat at the same table during one of the parties. I didn't recall Jill interacting with him much, and I was curious about what had sparked this affair. Suddenly, I had an idea that was sure to stir things up. I got out of my car, went into the motel office, and asked to see the local phone directory. I quickly found Joseph and Melinda Bateman listed, stepped outside, and dialed their number on my cell phone. "Hello, is this Mrs. Bateman?" "Melinda Bateman." "Yes, who's calling?" "You don't know me, but something else is interesting. Do you know where your husband is right now?" "He's at the gym. And why the hell do you care?" "I think I should inform you that he's currently at the Red Roof Motel near Maple Road, in room 142 with a woman." "You're lying. He wouldn't dare do something like that." "Check for yourself, Mrs. Bateman." Click. The phone went silent, and with a smile on my face, I returned to my car and waited to see what would happen next. About 20 minutes later, a large Cadillac stormed into the parking lot and stopped in front of room 142. The very angry red-headed Amazon got out of the car, and after confirming that her husband's car was parked outside, she began pounding on the door of room 142. A few minutes later, the door opened, and I saw it was on the chain as Joe peeked through the gap. That didn't stop Melinda. She stepped back and kicked the door wide open, slamming poor Joe in the face. I was really starting to enjoy this as I imagined a very angry woman beating up both Joe and Jill. It took me a few seconds to realize that I had seriously underestimated the fury of a scorned woman. Gunshots rang out from the room. From where I was sitting, I couldn't see into the room, but the shots didn't bode well for Joe and Jill. I was in shock when I saw Melinda return, clutching a 9mm pistol. She got into her car and sped out of the parking lot with screeching tires, almost hitting a truck. A few seconds later, Doors from other rooms started to open, and people cautiously stepped out to see what had happened. The clerk from the office rushed over, peeked into the room, and then turned to a nearby guest, shouting, "Call 911. Hurry." I didn't dare move. I thought that if I started the car and drove away, it would draw attention to my strange behavior. Instead, I got out of the car and joined the crowd that had gathered at the door of room 142. I could barely make out Joe's body sprawled on the bed, with blood flowing from his chest. I didn't see Jill. Within a few minutes, the ambulance and police arrived, and I had to decide what to do. Without a doubt, my wife was also in the room and was most likely shot. Should I rush to see what happened to her? I thought to myself that she wasn't really my wife anymore. Besides, should I feel responsible because of my call to Melinda? I didn't think I should be held accountable for someone else's actions. The police quickly secured the crime scene as the paramedics entered the room. A few minutes later, a medic came out and shook his head at the police sergeant. From that, I concluded that both Joe and Jill were dead. People started to disperse, and I decided to follow suit. No one noticed as I got into my car and drove away. Police detectives and the press were just starting to arrive as I was leaving. Some might say I was a heartless bastard for not staying to see what happened to my wife, but I felt that she had broken our marriage vows, and I was no longer responsible for her. It might seem cruel now, but it's important to remember that I was still boiling with anger, though I did feel a little sorry for her. That evening, an hour or two after I got home, 2 police officers arrived. Mr. Donovan. I knew they were there because of what had happened at the motel, but I tried to act as though I knew nothing about the incident. Yes, how can I help you? Is Jill Donovan your wife? Yes. Is there a problem? We regret to inform you, sir, but your wife is dead. Both he and his partner looked appropriately upset and somber as they said this. I assumed they had delivered bad news like this before. Now I had to appear suitably shocked by the news of my wife's death. I wasn't entirely sure when I left the motel, but I had expected it. Dead. What happened? She said she was going to the gym when she left this morning. The officers glanced at each other before responding. She was shot, sir. Shot? Why? Where? It was at a motel on Maple Street, sir. The officers were starting to feel very uncomfortable. What was she doing at a motel? I began to feel nervous. She was with a man, sir, and his wife found them and shot them. My God, how terrible. But officers, I recently found out my wife was cheating on me, so I'm not surprised. Where is this man's wife? Did you catch her? She's dead too, sir. She took her own life. I was almost speechless. My God. Yes, sir. Will you be all right, sir? Yes, yes. Thank you very much for the information. Where is my wife now? They took her to the city morgue, sir. You can go there to identify her, and then make arrangements for the funeral. The morgue opens at 9. Thank you again, officers. I'll do that in the morning. Good night, I said, closing the door. I don't think I looked or acted appropriately, as if I were truly shocked by the news, but I felt no remorse for my actions. Now there were other things to take care of. First, I called Jill's parents. They should be the first to know, I thought. When I told them what had happened, they were initially speechless and didn't believe that their daughter was dead or that she had been committing adultery when she died. They agreed to meet me at the morgue the next morning to help with the final funeral arrangements. It was a sad conversation, and I knew it would be hard for them. Then I called my parents and informed them about what had happened. They were just as shocked as Jill's parents and couldn't come to terms with the fact that Jill had been unfaithful and was now dead. I knew the news hit them hard because they had always loved Jill. Until recently, I had loved Jill too, but the last few months had been tough on our marriage, and I felt my love for her slipping away. When I found out she was cheating on me, whatever remained of my love for her simply vanished, and I started to hate her. Now, I couldn't even mourn her. It began to dawn on me that my call to Melinda, informing her about her husband's affair, might attract the attention of the police. So I planned to call my lawyer in the morning and arrange a meeting to discuss my involvement in the deaths of my wife and Joe. I didn't think I had done anything that could get me into trouble, but I wanted to be sure, just in case. The police would investigate what happened with Joe's wife, and I wanted to be certain of my legal standing. That evening, I went to bed early but couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the events of the day in my mind, wondering if I could have done anything differently. I concluded that there was nothing I could have changed. Later that week, I met with my lawyer, and after hearing my story, he confirmed that I couldn't be held legally responsible for the deaths of my wife and her lover. In any case, the police never showed any interest in my phone call to Melinda. It may sound unpleasant, but I felt like I had ended my marriage in a better way than if it had resulted in a divorce. I was her sole beneficiary, so all the assets became mine. If we had divorced, I would have had to split everything with her, and that would have been very costly. Now, I'm looking for a new wife, and at 36, I still have time. So, children will definitely be part of my next marriage. Sometimes I find myself grateful for the bedbug bite that started it all. I did hire an exterminator, and he conducted a thorough cleaning and inspection, finding no more pests. Story 2. My heart filled with pride as I watched my daughter round second base. The outfielder made an error, throwing the ball back into the field. Brooke didn't even slow down, watching the left fielder's throw. I held my breath as Brooke barely managed to intercept the relay to third base. How many times had I told her to never make the first or last out of the inning at third base? The fans on our side of the field let out a collective sigh. It was the bottom of the 9th inning in the district championship game. After 9 innings, the game ended in a tie. And now, in the second overtime, Brooke had hit a triple. I've been a baseball fan my entire life, but I've never been as excited or as nervous as I was in that moment. My daughter seemed determined to win the game, even if she had to do it all by herself. The next batter struck out on 3 pitches. Now we had 1 out and a runner on third. The next batter hit the ball to third base. Their third baseman was good. She watched Brooke return to the bag, then threw the ball to first base. Brooke sprinted home. I couldn't make a sound. A lump the size of an apple formed in my throat. It felt like everything was happening in slow motion. The first baseman caught the ball and threw it to the catcher. Brooke slid toward the back of the plate, just as the catcher reached out to tag her. It was so incredibly close. Time stood still as everyone waited for the umpire's decision. After what seemed like an eternity, he spread his arms out and down, palms level with the ground. An uproar erupted. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I watched as Brooke's teammates enveloped her in a group hug. For a moment, I felt sorry that the other team couldn't win as well. They had put in an incredible effort, but only one team can come out victorious, and that's part of the game. I was sitting in the car when Brooke walked across the parking lot. She was laughing and joking with her teammates. Was there ever a more beautiful, smarter, or more athletic girl in the world? I was overflowing with love for this young beauty. "Hey, Dad," Brooke greeted as she slid into the passenger seat. "So how did you like the game? And don't start with the whole 'don't make the first out at third,' Dad." "Brooke, there are some fundamental truths in baseball that prove themselves over and over again." "That's one of them," I replied. "I didn't make it up, but it's a fact." "And how about the fact that my arm was hurting, and I didn't think I could pitch to another batter, let alone another inning?" she asked. "We had to get it done in that inning, or we'd end up in deep trouble. We should probably ice your arm tonight, Brooke. I didn't know your arm was hurting." "Did you tell your coach?" I asked. "No, Dad. It would have put her in a tough spot. She would have had to pull me. And she didn't really have anyone else to put in. Nancy has a sprained ankle, and Stephanie is out with the flu. Now, next week, we're heading to the States." Brooke smiled. "That's definitely better than ending the season, right?" I marveled at the child sitting next to me, The one I used to change diapers for and teach to ride a bike. I showed her how to throw, catch, and hit. Now she's the reason her school won the district championships and is heading to the States. I smugly gave myself some credit for her many successes in both academics and sports. Where are we going, Dad? You missed the turn for the 6th Highway. We're going to celebrate the district win, dear. I heard that the new Hilton Hotel in Wilkes-Barre has one of the best restaurants in the area. I think we both deserve a big steak and baked potato, I announced. Dad, you're the one who loves steak and potatoes. I'm ordering lobster, Brooke declared. I could offer you a frosty mug of MGD to wash down your steak. Brooke laughed. Hey, I never thought about that, but now that you've suggested it, I just might. Brooke, you're a genius. Yeah, I know. The fact that we've spent our whole lives recycling beer cans is etched in my brain, Dad. Honestly, I'd have to be an idiot not to know what you like. You're not that original, you know, Brooke teased. When we entered the restaurant, there was already a 10-minute wait for a table. They handed me one of those pagers that light up and vibrate when it's your turn. I sat on a bench while Brooke went to the ladies' room. She came back about 5 minutes later. I didn't pay much attention at first, but I noticed a few minutes later that tears were streaming down Brooke's cheeks. Brooke, what's wrong, honey? Is your arm hurting? What's going on, sweetheart? I asked. You know Mom couldn't come to my game because she had to go to Philadelphia for work, right? Brooke sobbed. So that's it. Brooke, you know your mom has a high-demand job at the insurance company, and she has to travel a lot. She really wanted to come to your game, but her schedule wouldn't allow it, I reasoned. Don't be upset about it, dear. She'll probably make it to the States. I don't care if she ever comes to one of my games. She can go straight to hell. Brooke yelled. I was stunned. Brooke had never spoken badly about her mother, nor had she ever used such vulgar language, even though she had occasionally heard it from me. Her emotional outburst was a complete shock to me. Oh, Dad, you're as blind as I am. Mom didn't go to Philadelphia. She's inside with some sleazy jerk, holding hands and laughing with him. She doesn't care about any of us. Brooke couldn't have shocked me more if she had told me she just signed a contract with the Yankees. My wife, Brooke's mother, involved with another man. My head started to spin. Brooke wrapped her arms around me and began to sob. Tears started rolling down my own cheeks. How could one of the best days of our lives turn so quickly into a nightmare? I pulled away from Brooke just long enough to return the pager to the hostess. Then I hugged her and led her back to the car. I helped her into the passenger seat and then climbed into the driver's seat. I didn't start the car because I could barely see. We sat there together in the parking lot for another 10 minutes. Gradually, the nausea, shame, and horror subsided, and I was able to wipe my eyes and regain focus. Brooke, are you sure it was your mother? I asked quietly. It's entirely possible you made a mistake. We might be getting upset over nothing. It could have been someone who just looked like Natalie. Seriously, Dad. What? I don't know what my own mother looks like. There must be thousands of purple Lexus SUVs with plates that say, hat, like that one over there. Right. Brooke said sarcastically. I looked in the direction she pointed and saw Natalie's car a few rows ahead of where we were sitting. There was no mistaking it. I'm sorry, Brooke. I guess I was just trying to deny that this could happen to me. To us, I apologized. It's perfectly clear that it's your mother in that hotel. She lied to both of us and is cheating on me. We need to accept this fact and decide what to do next. And then my phone rang. I knew who it was even before I looked at the screen. It was Natalie. I didn't want her to realize that Brooke, and I knew where she was and what she was doing. At least not before I had time to decide on my next steps. Hello, Natalie. I answered as calmly as I could. Hi, honey, Natalie exclaimed. How did the game go? I'm dying to know who won. The game. We won it, and next week we're heading to the States. Brooke played well, I replied, downplaying her performance. Put her on the phone, dear. I want to congratulate her and tell her how proud I am. I wish I could have been there." Natalie lied. "Well, she's with some of her teammates right now, Natalie. I'll pass along the message," I promised. "Are you in Philadelphia?" "I'm driving down Broad Street as we speak." Natalie laughed. "The traffic's slow, so I thought I'd call and see how everything went." "Be careful in that new car, Natalie. You're in your Lexus, right?" I inquired. "Of course, Tim. I love this car. It's so safe and much less of a gas guzzler than your Ford." "I've got to go, Tim. I'm almost at the hotel." "Love you, and I'll call you again tomorrow," she promised. I hung up the phone and looked at Brooke. It seemed like she was about to break down again. Then she snorted and smiled at me. "Screw her, right, Dad?" Brooke asked rhetorically. "We'll be just fine without her. Maybe even better." "We will, as long as you stop using bad language, young lady. Things may have turned to crap, but that's no reason to act like you're from the lower class." "I raised you better," I scolded. "Sorry, I was just so angry, and it felt like only curse words could fit the situation," Brooke explained. "I feel better now, but I'm worried about you, Dad." At first, all I could think about was how little my game meant to her. She'd rather sneak off and sleep with some guy than watch me play in the district championship. I didn't even think about how awful you must feel. "Well, yeah, it hurts. I admit that. I don't know what to do next. It's such a shock. I can't even think straight." "Really, Dad? I thought you'd kick her out so fast it would make her head spin. She has absolutely no respect for either of us. Even without the guy, her lies alone would be enough to divorce her, don't you think?" Brooke asked. "It seems like it would be, but over the years I've learned it's better to think things through rather than act impulsively. I can always file for divorce. I just need to be sure it's the right course of action," I replied. "Dad, do you have a spare key to Mom's car? If you do, could you give it to me, please?" "I do, Brooke, but why do you need it?" I asked. "I think it would be the final proof. If the key fob works on that car over there, we'll know for sure that Mom didn't stop at some hotel in Philadelphia," Brooke reasoned. I handed Brooke the key, and she quickly jogged over to the car. As she approached, she pressed the button on the fob, and I saw the headlights blink. To my surprise, Brooke got inside and started Natalie's car. She waved at me as she drove past. I quickly started my own car and turned around to follow her. I didn't have to follow her far. She drove a block, pulled into a parking lot, went all the way to the back corner, and jumped out. Approaching my car, she pressed the button to lock Natalie's car, then climbed back into mine. "This is just a small taste of what Mom's life is going to be like," Brooke laughed. "Imagine when she can't find her car. She won't be able to report it stolen in Philadelphia. Her story will fall apart under police questioning. If she reports it stolen here, she'll have to explain why the car is here when she said she drove it to Philadelphia. Lies make everything more complicated." I didn't know whether to be proud of Brooke or to schedule her an appointment with a psychiatrist. I would have never come up with such a brilliant idea. But the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Let Natalie find out firsthand how lies can come back to bite you. We stopped at a fast food place a few miles down the road and had some fries and a burger. Then we headed home. Brooke started asking some thought-provoking questions. "How long do you think Mom has been sneaking around behind your back, Dad? Do you think she's done it many times? Why do you think she's doing it? Is she some kind of sex maniac or something? How has your personal life with her been?" "Brooke, I've thought about it. Lately, she's been really kind to me in the bedroom. I honestly can't complain about that. As for how long and how often, I have no idea. I never thought she was particularly promiscuous," I admitted. Obviously, I had no clue that anything was wrong. "I bet she started when she began acting extra sexual with you. Women do that to lessen their guilt." "How long ago did she start?" Brooke asked. "I'm not sure. Probably around the Christmas holidays. I thought everything had been going great for the last 5 months. I know Natalie has been away more than usual, but she always seemed eager to make up for it. I admitted. You know you need to go see a doctor for a checkup, right? You don't know who that guy has been with, do you, Dad? Everyone he's slept with. You could say you've slept with too, in terms of diseases, Brooke warned. You should also get protection if you plan to keep sleeping with Mom. Brooke, I'm not going to buy protection. Wouldn't that be a clear sign that I suspect something? Your mom isn't stupid, even though she's acting like it, I added. But I can't have sex with her anymore. I've lost all desire to be intimate with her. I'll go for a checkup and just find ways to avoid her until I figure out what to do next. Just make sure you take care of yourself, Dad. I'm going to rely on you more than ever. When you decide to divorce her, I'm going to live with you. That's for sure, Brooke stated firmly. Why are you so sure it'll end in divorce, Brooke? Isn't there a chance that Natalie and I could work things out? Dad, you're always gentle and kind to Mom and me, but I know what you're thinking and feeling. You'll never be able to accept that Mom is lying to you, even if you could get over the sex. She's past it, and it's just a matter of when you accept that fact, Brooke predicted. I wondered how many men in my position, probably millions over the years, have a smart daughter with whom they can discuss everything. Brooke kept me from falling apart. She made me look at the situation logically rather than emotionally. She only had my best interests in mind, and no hidden agenda. Could there be a better confidant for anyone? The next day, I made an appointment with the doctor. After work, I stopped by the school to pick up Brooke after her practice. I arrived a little early and watched the girls practice. Other parents were constantly praising Brooke's performance. I felt pretty good about that, but lousy about my marriage. Natalie showed up around 7. I tried to greet her the same way as usual, but it felt weak to me. I wondered if Natalie would notice. I needn't have worried. I missed you so much, Tim, Natalie exclaimed. And I'll show you just how much later. By the way, I wanted to ask, do you still have the spare key to my car? Of course, here it is in my pocket, I replied, reaching inside and pulling out her spare key. Did you lose yours? No, otherwise I wouldn't have made it home, right? Natalie answered a bit too quickly. I just thought I should have a spare in case I lose mine. All right, I agreed and handed her the key. She must have found her car, but had suspicions about how it had been moved. Now, she would be more careful. As if on cue, Brooke walked into the room. Hi, Mom. How's Philly? Did you have a good time? She asked. I wasn't expecting to have a good time, Brooke. Those meetings are long and exhausting, Natalie insisted. They're not fun. All right, Mom. Long and exhausting, but not fun. Got it. So why do you keep working if it's so hard on you? Dad makes good money, and you're smart. You could find something that gives you more free time to spend with us. I actually love my job most of the time. Plus, I won't always be traveling this much. I think things will settle down by the end of the year. And then I'll have plenty of time to spend with you both. You'll see, Natalie replied, carrying her small suitcase into the bedroom and closing the door. Brooke gestured for me to follow her into the kitchen. Did you hear that, Dad? Looks like her lover will be moving out by the end of the year. And then you can have Mom back. How's that for a deal? Lies and potential STDs for another 6 months or so, and then it'll all be over. Unless, of course, she finds a new stallion. Can you live with that decision? Brooke asked. You're reading too much into one sentence, Brooke, I pointed out. It might not be what she meant, and it's probably not like that at all. Remember, I grew up around both of you, and I know how you both think. Mom believes she can have this affair and then return to a normal life next year without anyone getting hurt, Brooke insisted. Well, that's debatable, Brooke. I can't live with that kind of situation for long. I can't live with it for even a day. It's incredibly stressful for me, I admitted. Well, it's going to stay that way until you take steps to resolve the situation, Dad. These things don't just go away on their own. You know that. That evening, I told Natalie that my back and head were hurting. But even then, she suggested I just lie down, and she would do all the work. It took some effort to talk her out of having sex. This is what my life had come to. I had to convince my own wife not to have sex with me. It made me really angry. The next evening, as I watched Brooke's team finish practice, it seemed like some of the other girls' moms were friendlier than usual. Brooke noticed it too. She mentioned it on the way home. "Dad, I saw Emily's mom holding your hand while she was talking to you. It looked like she was pressing her chest against your arm." "That's not accidental when a woman does that," Brooke assured me. "Then I saw Mrs. Thomas offering you her soda. It seems like you've suddenly become the stud among the baseball parents." I thought it was strange too, I admitted. I had a clear sense that these women were being unusually friendly for some reason. Could it be that since you'll soon be a free man, they're lining up to sign a contract with you? Brooke asked. "What exactly are you talking about?" "Brooke, they don't know that I might become free. Besides, my market value isn't that high," I concluded. "Well, I might have mentioned in the locker room last night that my mom is cheating on you," Brooke said. Emily and Steph found it particularly interesting. Both of their dads left their moms in the past few years. They thought you'd make a decent stepdad. Apparently, their mothers agree. Once again, I was stunned by what my daughter had said. She told her teammates that Natalie was cheating on me. Why not just write it in the newspaper and post it online? What were you thinking? This isn't something everyone needs to know, Brooke. It's so embarrassing for me. Haven't you thought that maybe other people already know, Dad? Isn't it even more awkward to be ignorant in a situation where everyone else is aware? The girls already know about it. Trudy's mom saw your loving wife and a man enter a room at that hotel a few weeks ago when she was there for a conference. The only difference now is that the other moms know you're aware of Mom's affair, so it won't seem like they're the ones breaking up the family. Let's face it, our family is pretty much already broken, Brooke concluded. How many times can a person be shocked before it becomes normal and stops being shocking? Other people knew I was being cheated on. Somehow, that made everything feel even worse. The last shred of my pride had been ripped away. After this week, nothing could surprise me anymore. "That's not all, Dad," Brooke added. "Sarah has been complaining since last winter that her dad is often not home. Last week, she told us they're moving after Thanksgiving because her dad's insurance company is transferring him. Last night, Trudy's mom saw Sarah's dad picking her up after practice. And guess what? She recognized him as the same guy who's been sleeping with Mom. Tonight, I went to the car with Sarah and confirmed it. He's the same guy who was with her that night when I saw them." All this information made my head spin. How did the kids manage to figure out so much? Could this all be a coincidence? Is there even such a thing as coincidence? Can our children really know us that well? Why was I even pretending to think about it? All I needed was to ask Brooke. "What do I do now, Brooke?" I groaned. I can't think clearly anymore. "Well, I'm glad you asked, Dad. I knew that for most of the soccer or baseball moms, you'd seem like a good catch. Those ladies confirmed it today. You don't have to put up with a woman who lies and cheats. You deserve better, and I'll help you get it. But first, you need to get rid of the dead weight." It was the night before Brooke's first game in the state playoffs, and Natalie had to leave on yet another business trip. She promised Brooke she would drive all day, if necessary, to make it back in time for the game. That last lie somehow helped ease our conscience. There was a knock on the hotel room door. Room service had arrived with a bottle of champagne. I had convinced the management that the couple in room 402 was very close to us, and we wanted to surprise them. It all sounded very friendly and loving. When the door opened, I slipped a 20 into the shirt pocket of the guide, delivering the champagne, took the bottle, and pushed my way inside. Behind me were Brooke, Sarah, and Sarah's mom. Natalie was lying in bed, clutching the sheet to her chest. The stallion was in a bathrobe, looking completely bewildered. "We really didn't want to disturb you at work," I began. But Sarah and Brooke wanted to celebrate their district win with all their parents. The fact that Sarah hit a 2-run homer in the bottom of the 7th to tie the game, and then made the game-saving throw in the top of the 8th, while Brooke pitched a 1-hitter and hit a triple in the 9th to score the winning run, seems to have slipped past both of you. Try to imagine how proud Susan and I are of the girls, and then imagine what you missed. Susan raised 4 glasses, and I poured champagne into each one. I had managed to open the bottle before room service knocked. I handed a glass to Natalie and the man in the bathrobe. To the truth and to our daughter's achievements, I made a toast. To a new direction in our lives, and to Sarah and her mom not having to move this fall. And most importantly, to smart kids and good lawyers. Susan and I sipped the bubbly while the girls drank soda. "Don't bother coming home, Steve," Susan said firmly. "Sarah and I will do just fine without you. My lawyer assures me that the settlement will allow me to keep the house and live comfortably. Sarah won't have to change schools again. You'll keep this mistress of yours, so I think that's pretty fair." Susan smirked, though without any real humor. "Tim, Brooke," Natalie shouted, "I love you both. Don't do anything rash. It's not what it looks like." "Well, I'm glad to hear that, Natalie," I said, relieved. "Because it looks like you're lying naked in bed with that lover. What part am I seeing wrong?" "Look on the bright side, Mom," Brooke added. "You won't have to lie to avoid attending my events. You can sleep with whoever you want, anytime you want, without feeling guilty. You won't have to worry about giving Dad AIDS or any other STDs. You'll never have to see how hurt he was when he found out he was being cheated on. I know you want the same thing for Dad as I do, for him to be happy, and for some reason, I think he will be now. Thanks for everything, Mom. Just don't put me in an awkward position by showing up at any event I'm part of, okay?" The 4 of us walked out the door while Natalie quietly sobbed. We got into my car, and I drove us home in silence. I kept thinking about everything that had happened over the past few days. I never imagined I would confront my wife this way, but I felt strangely relieved. Brooke had been right all along. We needed to deal with it head-on. That night, Brooke came into my room before going to bed. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked softly. "Yes, Brooke, I think I will be. It's hard, but I know we're better off now," I assured her. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I'm proud of how you handled it," Brooke said, giving me a hug. I hugged her back tightly. "Thank you, Brooke. I couldn't have done this without you." As Brooke left the room, I finally felt a sense of closure. It wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was the beginning of a new chapter. I knew it would be a tough road ahead, but with Brooke by my side, I was ready for it. Story 3. Dave Brown was sitting in a chair in his living room. Opposite his chair stood an empty couch, and between his chair and the sofa was a coffee table with 3 glasses of champagne. 1 full, 2 empty. A bottle of champagne sat in an ice bucket next to the table. Anyone watching him as he relaxed at 7:02 p.m. would have been a little concerned when he clearly said, "That's right, I hear her car in the driveway." But there were no observers. Dave was alone in the room. He continued to sit with a relaxed expression. When the front door opened, he couldn't be seen from where he was sitting, but he immediately heard his wife's voice. "Where are you, Dave?" "In the living room." Dave stood up abruptly as his wife entered the archway. She was holding the hand of a man 5 years younger than her, 49, thin, of average height, wearing a business suit. In her other hand, she held an orange A4 envelope. Dave, this is Michael." "Michael, this is my husband, Dave." Noticing that she was looking away and was generally nervous, Dave took 3 steps and warmly shook the intruder's hand. "I'm very glad to meet you, Michael. Do you mind if I call you Mike?" "Not at all, sir." "Can I offer you a glass of champagne?" "Please have a seat." Dave watched as 2 very embarrassed people sat down on the sofa and took the offered glasses after he filled them. "To your health. Now, could you tell this simple soul what's going on?" Deborah and Mike looked at each other. Mike nodded slightly and squeezed her hand. Dave, this isn't a very nice thing to talk about, so I'll just say it straight. Michael and I fell in love. I would like to get a divorce so we can get married." She stopped, expecting her husband's anger. She looked up from the floor to see Dave's expression. She didn't expect his face to remain neutral. Unconsciously, she moved a little closer to Mike. "Okay, Deb, are these divorce papers?" Deb looked up again, stunned. She had rehearsed this scene in her head many times, but never, not even in her wildest dreams, had it looked like this. She looked at Mike and tried to convey with her eyes, "I don't know what to say." He took the envelope from Deb and placed it on the table. "Yes, Dave, that's true. I think you will find them very reasonable. Deb doesn't ask you for anything other than her car. Included in the package is her statement of relinquishment of this house, your car, all your joint assets, and your retirement fund. Everything is signed and notarized on our part. I must warn you that I am a lawyer, and therefore everything is fine, but feel free to hire your own representative to put your mind at ease." "Well, I must say you are both very generous." Deb looked very excited, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "It was Mike's idea, Dave. In fact, he insisted. He said it's bad enough that he's stealing your wife without taking your hard-earned assets. This was not my motivation by any means, but Mike is quite rich even without your money. We will have more than you and I ever had." Maybe things would have been different if you had gotten a job after the kids were older and helped with the finances, Deb." Deb looked down again, so Mike asked, "Is your wife going to give a similar speech, or has she already received one?" "No, my wife died 8 years ago. I am a widower." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Really, thank you, Dave. It hurt like hell for a year or so, but time heals all wounds, as they say. Look, I really regret this, but I met Deb, and she was like the missing half of my soul. I didn't think I'd ever be full again. I wanted to tell you that I have been in love with your wife for several months now." "It's okay, Mike. I never hold a grudge. Please marry her with my blessing." Mike and Deb exchanged stunned glances. Deb, because it wasn't at all what she expected. Then she felt great relief. A few months ago, she made Michael believe that her marriage to Dave was over, that they tried to save it, but there was little hope. She knew that the weak point in her plan was Dave's reaction, which could make Mike realize that this was not entirely true. That's why she begged Mike to do it without confrontation. Mike insisted that real men solve problems head-on. He did not give in to persuasion. Mike was stunned because even after Deb told him that her marriage was on its last legs, he expected a more angry reaction from Deb's descriptions. He formed a mental image of Dave from what she said. He was a large, uneducated man who was used to solving problems with his fists. Mike toyed with the idea of bringing a bodyguard with him tonight, but eventually dismissed the idea. In the depths of his soul, he thought that if the offended husband hit him a little, it might ease his own conscience. His own sense of decency weighed on him. "So, Deb, I assume you met Mike at one of your girls' parties." Deb nodded toward the coffee table. "One of those girls' nights out that you assured me was completely harmless and didn't threaten our marriage when I asked." This time, Deb nodded toward the floor. "I think this is a lesson for you, Mikey boy." Mike looked at Deb. Deb's gaze moved to an area of the floor a little further away from Mike. "So what happens to people now? Come on, Deb, you have to have a plan. You're giving me the house, so I'm guessing you were going to pack up your things and move in with him. I won't bother you. I was going to do this tomorrow, while you were at work. The locks will be changed by tomorrow. I'm sure your lawyer friend will agree that this is a wise move on my part. It's easier if you do it now, isn't it?" Deb and Mike stood up to go upstairs. "How about we talk, Mike? Deb can start packing." "Come on, Mike, let's chat. I think you owe me at least this." Deb was torn between wanting to avoid this truly awkward situation and having to bear witness to everything that was said. In the end, Mike made the decision for her, sitting back down. "Go, Deb. I promise not to hurt him. I just want to chat until we get divorced. I will feel responsible for your safety. I just want to make sure he has your best interests at heart. Besides, you made the decision to leave me. I don't see the point in trying to talk you out of it. Our marriage is obviously dead." Both men watched her walk up the stairs and disappear. "I must say you are very reasonable, Dave." "It's okay, Mike. Between you and me, I haven't felt Deb's love for about a year now. I guess that's when you met. It will indeed be a relief. I have no desire to condemn both of us to a loveless marriage." "That's still very nice of you, Dave." "You're welcome, Mike. Now, as a lawyer, you know that whenever you sell a car or house, you are legally obligated to point out any known defects to the new owners." Mike laughed. "Well, slavery is dead, and I don't think Deb would like being seen as property that needs to be transferred. But I see what you mean, Dave." Dave smiled too. He correctly guessed that Mike was an intelligent and decent person. "Okay, now please believe that what I'm about to tell you is not dictated by malicious intent. I just want to point out some of Deb's flaws that may not be obvious after a year of dating. Besides, her future happiness is important to me. After all, I've loved her for 27 years. I would also like to share everything that I tried to do to make her happy but obviously failed. This way, you will know not to waste your time on the same thing." Mike nodded. He knew that what was about to happen probably wouldn't be entirely altruistic in intent, but he felt he had an obligation to listen to this innocent man. "Right? I'm guessing Deb is back on the pills." Mike nodded again, feeling a little awkward. It was tantamount to admitting that he slept with this guy's wife. "Yes, she takes pills. I had no idea she ever stopped. She was on the pill when we met, but about 6 to 12 months after we got married, she came off it. She said they suppressed her sexual appetite. From then on, it was condoms for me. I can't stand these damn things. They take away all the spontaneity. And I don't know about you, but I struggle to get by without them." "Yes, I know what you mean, Dave." Then, when we decided to stop at 2 children, she started using condoms as an excuse not to make love as often. I begged her to go back on the pills, but she refused, saying she didn't want to swallow artificial chemicals every day. Since then, our lovemaking has dropped from several times a week to several times a month, then to 0 about a year ago. Mike didn't answer. He knew Deb was very careful about what food she ate and chose chemical-free options wherever possible. Sex with her was still exciting and happened at least 3 times a week, even with restrictions on their meetings. "I know this is very ungentlemanly, Mike, but I want to know if my wife satisfies your sexual needs, because I was denied a lot of things, and then we stopped having sex completely until recently. I just got tired of getting knocked down and stopped asking. Maybe you'd like to write in your diary to keep track of any sudden lows every month or so." Dave paused so Mike could add something, but Mike didn't take the opportunity. "And here's another thing that I noticed only a couple of years after our wedding. One day, I looked around and suddenly realized that almost everything I owned before Deb was gone. A bed, clothes, a sofa, and photos of old girlfriends. Although, to be honest, I found them in the attic. I don't know if all women do this or if it's just Deb, but it was as if she wanted to clear the nest of previous female influences." Again, Dave paused, and again, Mike remained silent. He thought about his new bed and sheets. Then he remembered his conversation with Deb a week ago about the portrait of his first wife, the woman he loved dearly until circumstances cut her out of his life. "I hope you're better at spotting her lies than I am, Mike. Just 3 weeks ago, I asked if she still loved me and if things were good with us. She looked me straight in the eye and said yes. She did the same thing she always did, looked me in the eyes until I broke eye contact. I can't believe it only took 3 weeks to fall out of love so much." Mike reeled slightly from the surprise of this conversation and from all the information Dave was trying to force him to absorb. Something about those last 2 sentences was alarming, but he didn't have time to pinpoint the source. So he focused on the only aspect he could absorb. Don't worry, Dave. I am a lawyer. I spent 20 years learning how to spot liars. They always give themselves away. Fine. Again, just some advice that you can take or not. Watch to see if she takes off her rings when she goes to visit her sister. You might want to check out her underwear drawer. I advise you not to trust her blindly, as I did. It seemed to me that she was completely incapable of deception, but obviously, I am stupid. What more can I say? Oh yeah, if she stays true to form, she'll probably stop going to the gym in about 6 to 12 months and gain some weight. At that moment, Dave stood up, took a photo album from the shelf, and began flipping through the pages. Here are a couple of photos from 2 years ago, when she started going to baccalaureate parties. As you can see, her face and ass are plump. But after 2 children, who would be surprised by this? Mike turned a few pages and saw a plumper version of his bride wearing much less makeup than he had ever seen. He was a little taken aback by the difference a little makeup made. He continued flipping through the pages. Is this Deb's mother I see? A strong resemblance. Yes, it is. Wait a minute. As you can see, she was a beautiful woman. This is her when she was about 50. She was a very glamorous woman. Dave picked up another album and opened it to the page he expected Mike to say. How old is she here? Around 55. Dave smiled and watched Mike alternately look at the 2 photographs. And now I promise to tell you about all my mistakes because of which she could not love me. I suggest trying a different approach. Mine was clearly unsuccessful. Dave paused to pour the champagne. About 25 years ago, she wanted a wedding. I tried to object, saying that we would be better off investing in a house, but she said that if I had faith that we would be together forever, then I would not save on such an important day for her. If you want, I can find you a copy of our wedding vows from memory. We adhere to the traditional love, honor, obedience, and abandonment of all others. If you try something different, you might end up doing better than me. Not really important to you, but don't bother working your fingers to the bone and doing a bunch of crap overtime so she can get the flash house she's always dreamed of. This clearly didn't deter her. In fact, we're probably here because I refused to pay for the facelift she wanted, preferring to invest in our retirement. She can be quite persistent when her heart is set on something. You probably noticed. Mike nodded, wondering if this characteristic of Deb was truly the admirable quality he still believed in. So I shouldn't have thought that I was acting smartly inviting her on a date every month to discuss everything that concerns me or our relationship which begins to irritate or causes the slightest indignation. Our last date was less than a month ago, and she didn't say anything. A man of your caliber, I'm sure, can come up with something better. At that moment, Mike noticed a twinkle in Dave's eyes and suddenly realized what he was up to. However, he made some good points. The idea of Deb being completely free of guile was very much at odds with some of his own thoughts of late. He was so taken aback by Dave's obvious amusement at the whole scenario that he again ignored the internal alarm. Dave continued to talk even though they both obviously knew Deb had stopped coming down the stairs once she was within earshot. Keep an eye on the lists of things she plans to remove from the house. This is a good hint that she already disdains the marriage and is looking for a replacement. It won't change much about what happens, but it will allow you to prepare for the endgame she has planned and encourage you to start digging for more evidence. Mike blinked and looked around. For the first time, he saw 3 champagne glasses and an ice bucket, a clear indication that all 3 present knew about today's meeting in advance when there should have been only 2 of them. His usual highly observant nature missed the clues. Dave watched Mike's eyes dart. Yes, I knew it would be today. Deb called me twice today to make sure I would be home by 7. Mike tore his eyes away from Dave and looked to where Deb was halfway down the stairs. Deb resumed her descent, clearly pretending that she had not heard the last minutes of the conversation. Dave, do you want to talk about which family photo I can take now or some other time? Dave ignored her and leaned towards the opposite couch, never taking his eyes off his rival. The last thing I did wrong was forgive Deb when I first caught her cheating on our marriage, Dave admitted. What? When? Mike asked. No, escaped Deborah's lips as she retreated into the kitchen. Yes, it was right after the birth of our second child. I forgave her because she and our counselor convinced me that it was an isolated mistake caused by postpartum depression. I often wondered if I was too soft on her. Perhaps a tougher line at the time could have prevented a recurrence. I justified my actions by saying that I was acting in the best interests of the children. They grew up to be good people, so I hope I did right by them. For her sake, I hope that you will be generous enough to forgive her when your time comes. I don't know what to say, Dave. You don't have to say anything, Mike. Just answer me. Look into your heart and ask yourself if you would forgive your late wife if you found her as your lover in your own bed for the first time. Mike lost his composure. He leaned forward, and out of the corner of his eye, Dave noticed some movement and saw pale-faced Deborah standing in the kitchen doorway. My wife would never show me such disrespect. We loved each other too much. Wait a minute, you said the first time Deb cheated on me. Were there other times? No, only twice, then and now. Deb ran out of the kitchen, screaming desperately. I'm done packing, Mike. If you take my bags, we can get out of here right now. Calm down, Deborah, Mike said. The last was said in a quiet but inexorable voice. Surprisingly, the voice belonged to Mike. Deb stopped in her tracks. Mike, Deborah assured me that she didn't cheat because you had an open marriage, Dave said. Did she look you in the eye when she talked about it, Mike? Mike looked at Dave, then at the cowering Deb, then back at Dave. Dave saw in Mike's eyes the sudden realization that he wasn't as good at spotting liars as he thought. What did she tell you about the state of our marriage, Mike? She said it's been shaking for a few years, Dave, that you had been seeing a psychologist for a while, but neither of you had any hope. Dave didn't answer, just stared at Mike as he continued talking to fill the void. Now, I think that doesn't really fit with what you were saying about still going on dates and asking if she loved you. Dave continued to look into Mike's eyes. Again, he chose the exact moment when Mike realized that he had been played like a complete sucker. An expression that could easily be interpreted as self-loathing flashed across the little man's face. Mike turned to the frozen Deborah. You're a Dan. You have turned me into the person I despise most, a man who sleeps with other people's wives without their husband's knowledge. Hearing this statement, Deb dropped to her knees. Mike was suddenly speechless and interested in the same patch of carpet that had so fascinated Deb before. Finally, he pulled himself together and looked at Dave again. Please, Dave, you have to believe me. I had no idea. Don't worry, Mike, Dave said. I told you she's a good liar. God, I wish she had told me that we have an open marriage. Then I might have gotten laid last year. The deliberate use of humor in a very tense situation seemed to work. Mike relaxed a little but remained silent. Does this mean that the engagement is broken? Yes, definitely. In that case, I want to introduce you to a couple of people, John and Alice. At that moment, the door to the basement opened. Hearing the noise, Mike turned around and saw a young man and a woman approaching. Mike, I want to introduce you to my son John and daughter Alice. They listened to our conversation through a microphone. John graduated from law school 2 years ago, and Alice received her degree this year. John and Alice shook hands with a confused Mike. John then took the envelope from the table and began to dispassionately examine its contents. Dave turned to his daughter. Do you believe me now, Alice? Yes, Dad, Alice replied. There is no doubt that she is a cold, cunning schemer. All eyes turned to the groaning Deb, who was still kneeling, but her head was now on the floor. Feeling the silence, she raised her head and met 4 accusing gazes. She jumped up and ran out the front door. No one made the slightest attempt to stop or follow her. John calmly finished looking through the contents of the envelope. Everything seems okay, Dad. Okay, thank you. Now, who wants a beer? This fizzy cat pee is good. but I need beer to get rid of the taste in my mouth. Mom, I think I have to go, Mike said. Stay here, little Mikey. We still need to figure something out. For example, well, I can forgive you for sleeping with that stupid Mike. She has an open marriage and all. But I have to decide whether to rip your head off and spit on your neck for trying to steal her, Dave said. Mike looked at the other man, noting that he was a head taller and much larger. Then he looked into Dave's eyes and saw the already familiar shine. Dave, have you ever thought about a career in law? The way you threw me off balance, passing off negatives as positives, and not giving me time to think was worthy of the best prosecutor I've ever seen. Dave smiled modestly but said nothing. He loved his job and the people who surrounded him at work. So, for beers, for the first time ever, Dave looked away until he was sure that the tears that had accumulated in the corners of his eyes had disappeared. He would no longer look into his eyes. By this time, Deb Brown was already 700 meters away. She was walking quickly and accelerating, as if her heels were on fire. Story 4. Hank woke up and discovered that his phone showed 10 missed calls and the same number of voicemail messages. He didn't recognize the area code. After several run-ins with Chinese robocall spam, he had set his phone to forward unknown numbers to voicemail. Usually, Beijing Betty didn't leave messages. His daughters were not up yet, so he started listening to the messages. That's when he learned that his wife, Randy, was not in Jacksonville, Florida, visiting her parents and sister for the weekend, as she had told him. Instead, she was in the burn unit of a hospital in Boulder, Colorado. Hank paused for a moment. His phone was giving him news alerts. Normally, this was annoying, but it never seemed worth the time to turn off this feature. Something about fire stuck in his head. He realized he had seen a news headline with the words fire in Boulder when his phone screen lit up that morning. He went to his phone's homepage and saw the headline, "Devastating Wildfire Destroys Boulder Suburb Overnight." Interesting. Hank would be the first to admit that sometimes he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but he could think of only one reason his wife, Randy, in their 8th year of marriage, would lie about where she was spending the weekend. He deliberately slowed his pace. There was no point in hurrying. He made coffee. The girls wouldn't wake up for at least another hour. Taking the coffee to his wife's workspace in the dining room, he grabbed her laptop. It was now protected by a password he didn't know. Randy, however, was forgetful and lazy. Hank looked through a small writing desk and found the password scrawled on a scrap of paper in a drawer. Once he gained access, he discovered that she hadn't even closed her email browser. She had simply shut down her computer, relying on the new password and her confidence that Hank wouldn't invade her privacy. All assumptions that existed in this family until this morning no longer applied, Hank thought. It was true. Everything had changed. She had been meeting with her ex-boyfriend from college, Josh Turner, at his house in Boulder on weekends when Josh's wife was away. This was the same man who had broken Randy's heart by falling in love with and marrying another woman. It seemed that over the years he had developed guilt about abandoning Randy, or perhaps it was simply longing. The emails Hank found didn't contain many details, mostly confirmations of arrival times. He assumed they poured their hearts out to each other over the phone. One interesting fact surfaced. Her parents and sister knew about it and agreed to cover for her affair. This wasn't in the emails but in the chats, which were also open. They all thought she should have married Josh, whose family had money. Hank was simply stunned, as if watching a car crash in slow motion, unable to look away. He took a deep breath to calm down. Otherwise, he might have punched holes in the drywall. After steadying himself, he called the hospital in Boulder. When the operator answered, he instinctively asked if Turner was a patient. When they requested his relationship with Mr. Turner, he claimed to be a friend. The operator then said she could not provide any information. This response confirmed for Hank that they did have a patient named Josh Turner. Next, he called the number left in his voicemail. It was a direct line to the hospital's admissions department. After introducing himself, The clerk informed him that Randy had been admitted with third-degree burns over more than 80% of her body, including lung damage from smoke inhalation. The fire had apparently erupted suddenly in a drought-stricken area, spreading quickly due to high winds and cutting off the only escape route. Over 100 homes had been burned and destroyed. "Sorry," said Hank. "This can't be my wife. She's in Jacksonville, Florida. You must have the wrong information." He hung up. Yes, of course, she was in Boulder. He knew it but wasn't about to make it easy for anyone. He looked again at his wife's computer and found Josh's social media page. Randy had indeed added him as a friend. On his page, Hank found Josh's wife, Tina. She had posted publicly from her family's home in San Diego, asking for prayers because she had just learned her husband had been hospitalized with severe burns in Boulder. It was time to get some answers from the God of vengeance, Hank thought as he messaged Josh's wife in the chat to introduce himself and share what he had discovered. He left his phone number. A while later, as he finished his coffee, he saw another missed call. He didn't recognize the number, but there was a voicemail from Josh's wife, Tina. Hank called her back. "Mrs. Turner, are you really named Tina?" he asked. "Yes," she said with a sigh. "When I married him, there was always the worry that this would happen, with the woman Josh had rejected. I married for love. Now it's just a complete mess. You must be Randy's husband." "Yes. I knew about Josh, of course, when Randy and I met. Lately, she's been so calm, I didn't notice anything." "You're handling this very calmly, Hank. How are you managing that?" "You're speaking calmly too," he countered. "I'm taking pills," Tina admitted. "Josh is severely burned. They've already put him in a medically induced coma." I lost my composure when I heard that. Now I'm just in shock, especially knowing the truth about what really happened. "What's your wife's situation?" "She's severely burned, that's all I know. I told them it couldn't be her because my wife is in Florida." Tina chuckled. "Oh, the hospital is calling again. Let me answer, and let's keep in touch." She hung up, and Hank saved her number in his contacts to ensure the spam blocker wouldn't send the call to voicemail. A new call came in, this time from Randy's father, Bob. Bob must have seen the news and gotten worried. "Yes, Hank?" There was a pause. Bob never liked Hank, and Hank reciprocated the feeling, though they always maintained a facade of polite interaction. Now Bob wasn't bothering with politeness. "Hank, have you heard anything from Randy?" Hank paused. This question must have been hard for Bob to ask, morally speaking. "Why would I hear from her? Isn't she upstairs in her old room, spending time with you, your cantankerous wife, and your other idiot daughter?" Bob realized that Hank knew. He sighed. "Hank, she really does love you. I know we've never gotten along." Hank interrupted, his voice growing louder. "That's complete nonsense. And before you continue and irritate me even more, understand this. I've always known you never liked me. You were sure I wasn't good enough for your daughter, but Josh was. Your wife and other daughter also treated me like some sneaky intruder. I tolerated it to keep the peace, but that's over now. And let me make this clear. If you were standing in front of me right now, I would do something to you that you can't even imagine. After that, I'd deal with both of those women, just for fun. So, you and your lying damn family, you pathetic damn bastards." Hank hung up. There was nothing more to say. To save time, he blocked Bob's number as well as his mother-in-law's and sister-in-law's numbers. "Dad, why are you shouting?" his daughter Nicole asked as she entered the kitchen. Her younger sister, Rebecca, followed her. "Daddy said a bad word," Rebecca announced. "Really?" Nicole asked. "Say it again, Daddy." "I didn't hear it." Hank had to smile. "What was the bad word, Becky?" She frowned. "I can't remember." "You must have misheard. Now let's have breakfast. Today is pancake day. 3 pancakes each and some orange juice." The girls nodded and then went off to watch cartoons. After all, it was Saturday morning, and they liked Bubble Guppies. Hank hoped these cartoons were a gateway to something more substantial, like Pinky and the Brain or Phineas and Ferb. The phone rang again. It was Tina Turner. "The pills aren't working," she said flatly. "What pills?" Hank asked. "The pills I told you I'm taking to calm down. Well, they aren't working." "Why do you say that, Miss Tina Turner?" "At the hospital, they connected me to the ICU where Josh is. The nurse put me on speakerphone, thinking it might help him to hear my voice, even though he's in a coma." "And then what?" "I lost it. I yelled that his girlfriend was also badly burned and would probably die, and that it was his fault. I said that after you and I both get the life insurance payouts, we'd go on a round-the-world cruise and spend all our time having sex with each other until we were numb, just to get even." Hank laughed despite himself. "And his heart nearly stopped when he heard me, even though he's in a coma." "You're kidding." "No. It's hard to tell if my yelling caused it or if it was just a coincidence, but he pulled through. I'm sorry." She paused. "Sorry for what? Sorry that his heart nearly stopped, or sorry that he's still alive?" Hank's instincts leaned toward cruelty, but he controlled himself. "Just sorry that it all turned out this way." "Me too," she replied softly. After a moment of silence, Hank asked, "Tell me about this cruise we're going on." "Sorry. I don't know where that came from. Still, I'm curious." "I bet you are," she said, her voice tinged with amusement. "Are you really interested?" Hank smiled faintly. "Do I have a chance?" "I don't know," she answered slowly. "It's just that since I found out he was cheating, I've spent a lot of time wondering what's wrong with me. Knowing that you're interested makes me feel a little better. You don't look so bad yourself, by the way." "Thanks," Hank said, chuckling. "It's nice to hear, even if my wife clearly preferred your husband. Maybe the problem isn't us." "I'm starting to think that too," Tina said. After another pause, she added, "Have you ever wondered why they did it? I suppose it's because they thought they could have sex on the side and get away with it. That sounds so simple." "Well, what else could it be?" Tina sighed. "Listen, we both have a lot to process, but let's stay in touch. We're the only two people who understand what the other is feeling right now." "Agreed. I need to buy Bermuda shorts on Amazon for the cruise. And swim trunks," she joked, giggling softly. "At least you're making me feel better," Hank said. "Maybe the pills are working after all." "Get a cabin with a balcony," she said, laughing again. "Goodbye." "Goodbye." They hung up. Moments later, Hank saw that he had another voicemail. It was the hospital again. Hank called back and was connected to a nurse in Randy's room. She also put him on speakerphone. It must have been a different nurse from the one caring for Josh, but they seemed to follow the same set of protocols. "Mr. Henry Becker?" the nurse asked. "Yes," Hank replied. "I'm Nurse Young. We're on speakerphone right now in the burn unit intensive care. Your wife is here. She is severely burned and in a medically induced coma. She's next to me. We hope the sound of your voice might help, even though she's unconscious." Hank thought that after today, the hospital might need to update their standard procedures for dealing with a patient's family. He had to ask, "Why do you think that?" "I wasn't there when she was brought in," Nurse Young explained. "One of my colleagues was. She said your wife gripped her hand tightly and wouldn't let go until they understood what she was demanding. Call my husband. I'm so sorry. Your wife fought the team with all the strength she had and didn't let them do anything until they assured her they would deliver the message." "Okay," thought Hank. "Too little, too late. What should I say?" he asked. "Say whatever is in your heart," the nurse said naively. "All right," thought Hank. Game on. "Listen, you pathetic cheat, you dirty creature," he yelled into the phone. "I hope you die in agony and spend eternity in hell with Josh, who's also going to die. Just so you know, I'm going to use all the life insurance money I get to seduce Josh's wife, and I will never forgive you." The line went dead. The nurse must not have been paying attention at first, but it seemed she snapped out of it quickly. Hank realized that this wasn't the path to achieving peace of mind. One day he might feel some guilt for saying all this, but today was not that day. "Daddy, what does seduce mean?" asked Becky, holding her teddy bear. Hank froze. "My little ones. Oh, it means to deceive someone." Becky thought about this with a serious expression. "When is Mommy coming home?" This is what really angered him, the need to explain to his daughters what was happening. He should have thought it through carefully, but he wasn't in the mood. "As soon as she can, Becky." Becky went back to the living room. Hank watched as she plopped down in front of the TV. There was no way he was going to take the girls to Colorado to see their mother wrapped in bandages like a mummy. He didn't want them to have those kinds of memories. 30 minutes later, Hank had booked tickets for a week at Disneyland, a reservation at one of Mickey's hotels, and plane tickets. They were leaving the next morning. Nickel would have to miss some kindergarten, but so be it. Just as he received the tickets, the hospital called back. This time, they told him that Randy had suffered a heart attack and died, despite all efforts to save her. Hank asked when it had happened. It was exactly when he had yelled at her. Maybe he would advise Tina to try yelling at Josh again. No, let her handle it herself. In the end, Hank had to send Randy's medical insurance information to the hospital so they could provide the death certificate. He called a local funeral home and arranged for her cremation. Considering the burns, Hank wondered if he might get a discount, but they informed him it would still be full price. He asked them to mail the ashes to him after they returned from Disneyland. At Disneyland, the girls were sad that their mom wasn't with them, but they cheered up with plenty of sweets from the Bibbidi Bobbidi boutique. They spent hours riding attractions and meeting characters. The girls watched fireworks every night before collapsing, exhausted but happy, into their beds. Josh, meanwhile, held on until Thursday. Tina didn't yell at him anymore, so maybe that helped him hang on. After his death, Tina returned to Colorado and stayed with friends since her house had burned down. She acted like a noble widow for her children. She told Hank that she didn't explain Randy's involvement to them. Tina's kids were older than Hank's, and they knew their father had been hurt in the fire, so it was harder for her to avoid difficult conversations. Hank's daughters, however, had no idea. For a while, he continued as he had been, still not saying anything bad about their mother. It wasn't easy. Shortly after they returned from California, a delivery guy came to the door with 2 items requiring signatures. The first was a letter from Randy's relatives. The second was a box containing her ashes. The letter contained a request for Randy's remains so they could organize a memorial service and funeral in her hometown in Florida, if Hank didn't want to arrange something locally. They must have been calling someone else, Hank realized. The letter did not contain any apologies for covering for Randy's lies. This fact made his next decision easier. Hank hired a teenage girl from the neighborhood to babysit and left the girls at home. They were busy showing the babysitter all their new stuff and photos from the Disney trip on the tablet. With the ashes packed in a bag slung over his shoulder, Hank drove to a nearby national park. He headed to one of the more remote areas of the park, a site equipped with pit toilets made of cinder blocks instead of proper bathrooms. There he dumped the ashes into the toilet and snapped a photo as he did so. On the way back to his car, he considered that therapy might be a good idea. But the thing was, he wasn't angry anymore. At least not angry enough to hit someone. Destroying a reputation was something else entirely. Later that day, he posted the video on social media, explaining what he had done and why. Afterward, he wondered if the National Park Service would issue him a fine for polluting the latrine. If so, he'd gladly pay it. He never contacted Randy's relatives again, but he saw in the newspaper that they had held a memorial service in Jacksonville without him or his daughters. He told the girls that their mom had an accident while she was away and wouldn't be coming back. They took it as he had expected. Fortunately, their kindergarten teachers were wonderful and provided support during the difficult time. The life insurance payout was substantial. It turned out that Randy had taken out more coverage than Hank had realized. The money made it easier for him to restructure his life. He decided his daughters needed more fresh air, especially at playgrounds with lots of kids and pretty young mothers. Many of these women were sympathetic to his tragic story. He left out the part about Randy's infidelity. Sympathy was better than pity. Soon, the girls started getting invited to plenty of playdates, where the moms would introduce Hank to their cute, single friends. Slowly, Hank began to see a way forward. He never met Tina Turner in person, though they continued to chat on the phone from time to time. Despite everything, their shared pain offered a strange kind of solace. Hank's daughters thrived, blissfully unaware of the full story. For him, the road ahead was clearer now, paved with new possibilities. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.